So last night in the Mr. TARDIS Discord server, I hosted the Classic Doctor Who Club, and for those of you who are in the server, every 2 to 3-ish weeks we talk about a classic Doctor Who story. Normally it started off as stories that I'd never seen before, and then it's kind of expanded outwards into other things. The next one, we're going to be talking about Legend of the Sea Devils on the Sunday night that it broadcasts. We're going to just get together in the Discord server and talk about that. But we've also got the Classic Doctor Who Club. We've watched the Sea Devils, we've watched Enlightenment, a few others. I think one of the next ones we'll watch after Legend of the Sea Devils will be Terror of the Zygons. But yeah, we do that every couple of weeks. And in order to get part of the Mr. TARDIS Discord server, you can become an £8 and above patron. TFL Creative Media in the chat saying I was there. You were there. Thank you so much for being there. So yeah, we talked about Survival because I put it in a vote. It was either the TV movie or Survival that we talk about, and Survival won out by quite a substantial margin. So I watched Survival for the first time in a few years, a couple of hours before the conversation. And I have many thoughts about it. I really wanted to talk about it on stream, in addition to the Classic Doctor Who Club in the Mr. TARDIS Discord server. So for those of you, for whatever reason, do not know, Survival was the last ever classic Doctor Who story prior to Dimensions in Time, prior to the 1996 TV movie, the last proper story that was broadcast. Not the last one that was made, that was Ghostlight, but Survival was the last one to be broadcast in November to December 1989 for Doctor Who's 26th season, starring Sylvester McCoy as the 7th Doctor and Sophie Aldred as companion Ace, directed by Alan Waring and written by Rona Munro. Rona Munro is the only classic series writer who has also written in the revival. She wrote the Series 10 story The Eaters of Light, a story that honestly I couldn't tell you anything about it even if he had a gun to my head. That's not to say it's a bad story, I just genuinely don't remember anything about it. But Survival, on the other hand, is one hell of a vibe. It was a story that I picked up on one of the 2 Entertain DVDs around the late 2000s and just immediately fell in love with it. But upon my most recent watch, it's something that reads as more of a vibe than a general piece of classic Doctor Who. It's a 3-part story, so relatively speaking, in terms of classic Doctor Who, it really moves along at a very brisk pace. But it's a story that properly gets by on metaphor, gets by on atmosphere. The atmosphere really, really carries it a lot. The plot has got the 7th Doctor who taking Ace back home to Perivale. Perivale is a small borough in London, takes her back there in the late 1980s, and Ace discovers that loads of her friends have gone missing there. She stumbles across a friend there who says, "Oh, we thought you'd either died or gone to Birmingham," which is one of the best lines of the classic series just generally ever. And the Doctor and Ace discover that there are stray black cats wandering the streets of Perivale who are taking humans away, unsuspecting humans away for sport to the planet of the Cheetah People. Ace finds herself there, the Doctor finds herself there with a self-defense coach called Patterson, and Patterson winds up getting thrown into this adventure because he's part of the neighbourhood watch and the 7th Doctor is just stumbling around Perivale trying to lure in the stray cats. There's a great scene where he buys a load of cat food, puts it just out on the pavement, and there's a woman at the window who's like, "What are you doing?" And then the 7th Doctor is like, "No, shush," as if the woman's the one with the problem. But they get taken to the planet of the Cheetah People, and on that planet they find the Master, played for the last time in the classic series, Destiny of the Doctors notwithstanding. Anthony Ainley gives a superb performance as a Master who is kind of a bit far gone, because the planet of the Cheetah People has a mental influence on those who are on the planet, especially if you start participating in the hunt, in the chase, in the conflict and the fighting of the planet. And whenever a fight happens, a fight breaks out on the planet by one of the inhabitants there, the Cheetah People, mini explosions take place on the planet. Basically, if they fight, the planet dies. When watching it, I did have flashbacks to the Garth Marenghi clip.
I know writers who use subtext and they're all cowards.
But unironically, it works really, really well. Survival, written by Rona Munro, is a terrific vibe. Firstly, the production values are like off the charts great for the classic era of the show, where they basically had no budget and they were the little engine that could. Like their little Doctor Who production office just pushed to one side in the BBC as Michael Grade was trying to tear the whole institution down. But it looks great. There's terrific atmosphere. I love the colour grading on the planet of the Cheetah People and like the red sky. There's some wonderful shots of them on the planet, wonderful wonderful atmospheric shots of Anthony Ainley's master watching through the eyes of the Black Cat on the streets of Perivale. And what I loved about it is, like, of course we talk about this before, Rusty Davis and many other people, but this is a deeply politically charged story as well. It's clearly a rebuke of conservatism, or a rebuke of Thatcherism, where you've got an area like Perivale, which is just a defeated part of London in this story, just where people go missing and everyone's like, yeah, they've just gone. We think he's moved down south. We think he got a job at the docks, or we thought he'd either died or gone to Birmingham. And we've got this, the youth club has been now taken over by a self-defense club that Patterson, played by Julian Holloway, hosts every Sunday now. And he's pushing these guys. And the first time we see them, this guy's got another wrestler pinned to the mat. And he's like, yeah, you got to finish him. And the guy's like, I've beaten him, Sarge. And he's like, oh, do you think that's what's going to happen in real life? Survival of the fittest. And proper lays into the kid as well. And tries to prompt him into smacking him. This is a parallel to toxic masculinity. And then once he actually goes onto the planet of the cheetah people, and he then becomes the prey, and he's able to do very little to fight back, it's just the idea of one finger can be a deadly weapon, self-defense and fighting back, that falters when you're exposed to an enemy that does not follow those same rules. And I think with the cheetah people themselves, you've got this great subtext of them not even maybe starting off as cheetah people, because Lisa Bowerman plays a cheetah person called Kara, and at the end, when the master, spoiler alert, stabs her at the end, she reverts back to a human form, kind of subtly implying that she didn't start off as a cheetah person. Were all of the cheetah people on this planet humanoid? Did they look normal before being converted or turned because of the corrupting influence of this planet? That never goes answered, but it really makes you think. There's a lot of wonderful story details to this, like how the cats are able to take their prey to the planet of the cheetah people because that's their home. It's able to take them home. And this is utilized when the corrupting influence of the planet of the cheetah people is able to turn the humans into, it's able to possess them, and they're able to use that to get back to Earth. That's how they leave the planet. But when the Doctor and the Master are fighting at the end, where does the Doctor go? He goes back to his home. He goes back to Earth. They don't really draw attention to it, but the fact that the Seventh Doctor finds his home on Earth, I think was a really nice character beat that was really understated. But going back to the idea of it being a rebuke of Thatcherism. So Thatcher famously or infamously said that, we don't live in a society, we're all individuals, which firstly is just a horrible way to view the world, really. And survival kind of shows that we work better as a collective when we don't go to our baser instincts of survival of the fittest, where we try and fight each other, where we try and actively make the world a more hostile place, because that just turns us into animals. The competitive nature that Thatcherism sort of imbues in us. And doing G-Fan is right, we do live in a society, a self-destructive ideology. It's a corrupting ideology. And as James the Brony in the chat says, if we fight like animals, we die like animals. Which is the iconic line that gets the Seventh Doctor off the planet of the cheetah people, when he almost succumbs to the influence, but he rejects the ideology. He rejects the survival of the fittest, the need to fight, the need to conquer, that the Master has fallen for. And we were talking in the Classic Club in the Discord server, and some people, understandably, were saying that they were disappointed that the final Doctor-Master confrontation was a bit of a letdown. And I get the sentiment. It's a really short fight scene. However, I think that the Master in this story is not really the Master anymore. Anthony Ainley is giving a wonderful performance. I think it's his best of the classic series. It's so, malicious. Something that we didn't really see much from Ainley. But with the Master, when we see him, he's already kind of succumbed to the planet. He's putting on a front for the Seventh Doctor. He says, these creatures are mine to command. But when the Doctor's out of earshot, and the cheetah people turn to him, with their teeth bared, he's like, I'll find some food for you. He's not really in control of these creatures. He's putting on a front to the Doctor, and maybe he even in and of himself believes that he is above the influence of the planet. However, it's clear that he's fighting the influence, and he's already lost the battle. He is a shell of his former self. He's not the Master anymore. He has, whether he wants to admit it or not, he has devolved. He has succumbed to the primal instinct of the planet of the cheetah people. And at the end, when he's talking to the Doctor, he's like the planet's powerful. Even I nearly succumbed to it, and I'm a Time Lord. He's already lost the fight. He's in denial, I think. I think he just doesn't want to admit it to himself. And if he admits it to the Doctor, then he will probably succumb for real. So you're not really dealing with the Master anymore. You're dealing with something much more primal, which is why I think thematically it's a very interesting confrontation for the Seventh Doctor and the Master as well. How you've got the scheming manipulator, like the Doctor, who's able to turn a sniper away with just his words in the Happiness Patrol. And he has to almost put his fists up to fight the Master on the planet of the cheetah people at the end. But he doesn't succumb. For a moment, he seems like he's about to do it. He's on that edge. And in the end, he rejects it. If we fight like animals, we die like animals. And then he returns home. It's wonderful. And I think that if this was a 4-part story, the themes and the subtext and the metatext and everything, because you could also argue that this is a story about the continuous fight and the struggle of making Doctor Who year after year. This is a show fighting to survive, in a sense. It's hard to disassociate survival with the metatext of it also being the last broadcast story of Doctor Who, so maybe you're kind of thinking a bit too much into it. One of the best moments of the story is in part 3, when the Master has taken Midge, who's the self-defense student. He's taken him back to Earth, but he has fully succumbed to the influence of the planet, and now he's more animal than man. And it's almost like a corrupted version of the Doctor-companion relationship as well. The Master says, "You're the teeth to my trap, the teeth to destroy. I'm going to manipulate you into getting what I want." But then in the end, Midge gets onto a motorcycle to confront Ace, to try and prompt her into fighting. And Ace almost does it, but the Seventh Doctor rips her from the motorcycle and says, "If you fight now, you'll change completely forever." And the Seventh Doctor decides to fight that battle for her. Rather than manipulating her like a chess piece, rather than using her for his own ends, for his own grand plan, he decides, no, if she does this, I will lose her forever. I'll take the fight for her. It's a wonderful character revealing moment. There's an issue in that when the two motorcycles collide, the explosion looks a bit silly, and the Seventh Doctor somehow winds up in a completely different field, in an abandoned sofa and rubbish bins. It's very strange, and I don't know how Midge initially survived the explosion to have a death scene laying down on the floor. I love what it says thematically, and I love the lead up to the explosion. There's some great moments. I think it was TFL in the Discord server as well, who mentioned that there's a great shot where Ace has been looking after Kara, who's been injured, and is feeding her water from the planet, from a big lake that's nearby. And as Ace is kind of succumbing to the influence, the Doctor appears behind her and calls her back in. And there's a great over-the-shoulder shot, which kind of summarizes the Seventh Doctor and Ace relationship. And it's on the planet where those rules, that's the Seventh Doctor, has basically set the boundaries of the relationship between the Seventh Doctor and Ace. Those don't apply on this planet. It all goes out the window, and he needs to adjust, and he does. And it's so wonderful to see. From top to bottom, from beginning to end, it's an amazing story. There's even a great attention to detail about the friend that Ace has got, who she meets in part 1, who's collecting charity donations in front of the shop. The charity that she's collecting for is Hunt Saboteurs, which I believe it's still about today, is an anti-fox hunting organisation. So, as we all know, fox hunting is a conservative pastime, so that's just additional subtext on top of that, but also the idea of enacting violence upon nature. And I think that's such a great attention to detail. And Evil Dalek, have you talked about Dominic Glyn's music? I haven't, but it's still brilliant. I love the guitar riffs. It's something completely unlike anything, especially in the latter half of season 26, which is more historical and atmospheric, with stories like Ghostlight and The Curse of Fenric, which is set in a Victorian manor, and also in the 1940s, I think, Curse of Fenric, early to mid 20th century. But Survival is a real different feel to it. I love the guitar riffs, and there's the great low-key Doctor Who motif at the end when they walk away. Finn says, "What's even the point of fox hunting? Bloodsport." That's basically it. They say it's to stop numbers of infestations and stuff, but the data doesn't really support that out. It's basically just an excuse to get on horses and shoot things. And also, we need to talk about something that Rona Munro has admitted was very much intentional subtext, and it's Ace discovering herself on the planet, and the same-sex attraction, shall we say, the lesbian subtext from Ace and Kara. And that's very much intentional, apparently, as Ace finds herself on the planet, as she kind of, more instinctual, shall we say, more primal feelings that come to the surface. It's an awakening. Tom Blacklock, oh, here comes the gay subtext. Oh, here we go. This live stream just became an episode of Reversing Polarity Pod. It is subtle enough that it's like plausible deniability. But I think once you know it's there, it's kind of difficult to avoid. And at the end, once the Doctor is the day has been saved and the Master is somehow maybe trapped on the planet of the Cheetah People, and the Doctor stands behind her, takes the hat and the umbrella away. So Ace says, I felt like I could run forever, like I could smell the wind and feel the grass under my feet and just run forever. And the Doctor says, the planet's gone, but it lives on inside you. It always will. And Ace says, good. Yeah, she's learnt more about herself, and she likes what she's learned, and she's going to take that forward. And interestingly, in this same scene, when Ace asks about where all the Cheetah People have gone, the Doctor says they've been taken back to the wilderness. The place is different, but the hunt goes on. Which I did not put two and two together until yesterday. That's where the term wilderness years comes from. The time between 1990 and 2003, when Doctor Who was no longer in active production, was called the Wilderness Years, apparently because of that line in Survival. And I only just discovered that yesterday. Going back to Sophie Aldred as Ace, I think this is, along with Ghostlight, is Sophie Aldred's best performance as Ace. She is incredible in this story. She is absolutely on fire. You really believe like she's fighting this internal struggle between herself and the corrupting influence of the planet. There's some great comedy from Sylvester McCoy as well. There's the scene early on when he's with the two comedians trying to get the cat food, and the two comedians are just reading from the adverts that this is the flavour that will drive a tabby cat wild. But there's also a great moment where Ace is just dragging the Seventh Doctor around Perivale, and there's a back and forth exchange where I don't think the Seventh Doctor actually says anything. Like, it's just a bunch of open questions that Ace asks, and the Doctor just responds with, I imagine that was a full-on back and forth scripted scene. But McCoy was like, I can't bother to learn this. So he just goes, and they just carry on the scene as normal. So it moves along at a really brisk pace, but I think if it was any longer, it might not work. I think because it moves so briskly, because it is such a truncated story, it is able to excel based on its atmosphere and the subtext. I think it's more... it's a vibe of a story. It's more of a fever dream than it is a conventional Doctor Who serial. And that's what I kind of love about it. Like, this is not like a spacefaring, time-traveling story that you'd expect from Doctor Who in the 1980s. This is something much more existential. This is something that is almost avant-garde. And I think it's great that Survival, here comes the black cat, here she is. I think that Survival is such a fitting end for Doctor Who in the classic series. But I'm also happy that on its own, it's a terrific story. Am I right, Winnie? Finn, I thought Ghostlight was a fever dream. Season 27 was something else, wasn't it? Finn says Winnie was great in Survival. Yes, she absolutely was. Weren't you, Winnie? 1 second. Is it time to pick you up? Or are you just going to start crawling around? Is this cat time? Cat time. Oh, you smell nice. What have you been doing? Where have you been gone? Have you fallen in the bathtub again? We need to talk about the elephant in the room as well, which is the final moments of the story. Ghostlight was the last story to be properly filmed. However, at the point where the production team would have got the letter from the BBC saying, yeah, we'll see you all next year, we'll come back for more stories, we'll come back for another series. They didn't get that letter. So Andrew Cartmel, sensing that the writing was kind of on the wall, a couple of days after the broadcast of Part 1, decided to record a little monologue with Sylvester McCoy. And oddly enough, it was actually recorded on November 23rd, 1989, which is Doctor Who's anniversary date, of course, its birthday. The quote, there are worlds out there where the sky is burning, where the seas are asleep and the rivers dream. People made of smoke and cities made of song, somewhere where there's danger, Somewhere there's injustice. Somewhere else the tea is getting cold. Come on, Ace, we've got work to do. And I'm glad that they did that, because it does put on a nice little cap of the ending. It could have worked if there was a season 27, but it still works in the context of it being the last story. James Topboy, I also like the statement from Seven as "we've got work to do," implying she is now his equal. Yeah, it's a nice cap. Like, having Ace go back to Perivale and basically become a woman, shall we say, with the Seventh Doctor subtly embracing Earth as his home now, the final confrontation between the Seventh Doctor and the Master. Yeah, it's great and it works. I'm so glad that if Doctor Who had to end in 1989, that it did end on such a thoughtful, introspective story that inadvertently does sort of encapsulate the mood of the Doctor Who production team at the time, and also the state of the show itself and how it fights on, and how, like, the ongoing struggle of trying to create a better world. Because if we fight like animals, we die like animals.